The sprinkler.
Hey, Eric, how are you? What?
Why are you talking to me in English? What the heck is this?
Salut, Eric. comment ça va?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So yes, we'll be doing this podcast in English today.
Wow, I think it's the first one for me in English.
No, it isn't.
No, yeah, one at the Agile Tour, right?
Yeah, who was it?
It was the Kinevin model with, I forgot the name of those.
Horrible.
So, but it was about the Kinevin model. But we have someone great with us today.
Yeah, a relative unknown in the Agile community.
Maybe at the end of the podcast, everybody will want to know her. But right now,
Esther Derby will be discovered today on the podcast. So be ready to be popular, Esther.
Hi Esther, nice to meet you.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Je parle français un petit peu.
Ah, mais là.
Très bien.
Comme un enfant de 5 ans.
Oh,
No, that's great actually.
Yeah, but do you speak?
But I'll do better in
Québécois?
English.
Do you speak
No,
Québécois?
I do not. I
that's
do
a
not.
whole different.
It's a whole different thing. You're right.
Yeah, totally, completely.
So English.
I have a friend that moved from Calgary to here, and she took French classes in Calgary to prepare to come here. And once here,
just press the reset button and relearn everything.
Oh my gosh. So listen, thank you very much for participating in our podcast. We truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And we wanted to talk about there's a lot of activity happening right now in the States. So we just figured we'd step away from that and talk about something simple instead, organizational change.
Simple. Wow.
Simple and non-controversial.
Non-controversial, relatively speaking. I think it's yeah.
Yeah.
That said, so yes, we're lucky today. Esther will offer us today the step-by-step recipe to install change in your organization and how to become a effective evangelist.
Could I get the CD
Did I get that right?
It?
was at least one word right in what I just said?
Esther.
That's right.
That's the beginning.
I got the name right.
Oh, well, you hit a couple of my hot buttons right away. So I think the way we talk about change often makes it much harder. I mean, like when we talk about installing change, that if you think of that as a metaphor, it kicks off all of these frames in your mind. And if you think about installing, it's like you've got one mechanical device or electrical device, and you're putting a part into it, like screwing a light bulb in. And for one, change in organizations is a lot more complex than that. There's a lot more than just screwing in the light bulb.
Yeah.
But the other thing I find really interesting about that metaphor is that you don't expect either the machine or the part to have any emotional response. So when you prime yourself by thinking about installing change, you're kind of setting yourself up to be surprised when people actually have an emotional response to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not just resources. Wow.
Oh. They're not.
Damn.
Dang it.
That's why it's nice to go back to coding once in a while. The code always does what he asked it to do, for better or for worse. Human beings, it's another other ball of wax.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna quit this thing because it's binging in my ear.
Talking about the Slack, right? Oh.
That said, we will be exploring your magnificent book, 7 Rules for Positive Productive Change, or 7 heuristics.
Yeah, they're really heuristics rather than rules, and they aren't a stepwise process because heuristics are guides to problem solving. So you use the one that fits the problem that you're dealing with at the time. Although I would say the first one, which is striver congruence, is almost always applicable.
That's probably a common thread throughout all the rules.
Yeah.
Always
well, I think
congruence.
if anything's going to work, congruence will work.
Yeah.
And it's a useful place to start from, because when we have that state of balance, maybe I should say something about how I'm defining congruence. It's a a state where you're balancing your own needs and you're considering your own needs and capabilities and those of the other people involved, and then the context you're in. And when those,
also,
yes, yeah, you have to consider the context because, I mean, if you're in an organization and you're changing something in the organization, that organization has a purpose. So you have to be considering that purpose, right? I mean, most of us are not working for, just, fun little enterprises that don't have to make money, right? Most of them have to make money and they have a mission they're trying to serve. So we have to keep that in mind too. But when those three are in balance, roughly, I mean, it's never completely perfect. I think people are better able to access their thinking because they're not reacting out of fear. They're not defensive. They're not, blaming someone else. But they're also able to access their empathy. And I think that is something that's really undervalued in change, is having some empathy for what that experience is like for the people that you're asking to make a change.
And it's underestimated on how hard it is to show empathy in a context of an enterprise where you have pressure, deadlines, evaluation techniques used by HR. So showing empathy in that kind of context is not a given.
But
no, it's not.
But from your experiences, we all know that, but and I think a lot of people know that will start with empathy, but why do we forget it? Why do we skip that phase? Why do we don't spend enough time trying to interconnect and trying to use our empathy?
Well, I think most businesses are, for a long time, people were taught, leave your emotions at the door. And you have to be hard-headed and hard-nosed. This is business. And what people overlook is that in a situation where you are not compelling labor, where you actually want people to bring their thinking and their creativity, people bring their whole selves and their whole emotional world with them. And actually our emotions are super important. They're part of our cognitive system. Right. But I think, the business world for a long time is just, no emotions.
Never let them see you sweat.
We are, Don't be too soft on people. They'll slack off, which, all of these, axioms that people have been taught that are actually contrary to how people actually work in a creative and engaged way.
That's funny because I make a link between how we teach our children. From the past, we have that kind of idea that we must be hard with our children to be sure that they will not get too soft. And so that's the kind of way that we are managing in our business right now. Okay.
Well, I think the other thing about empathy is that people tend to think that if I'm empathetic, then either one, I have to feel the same thing, which no, that's not what empathy means. I have to fix it. No, that's not what empathy means. Or I have to just say, well, they're a little upset about this, so I can't push them. They're a little, so people feel like, if I empathize with them at all, then I can't have the conversation about the context we're in and the fact that we're failing as a business and we're shipping crap software and we have to, examine the way we're building our software and make some changes, right? So people get, I think, a little confused about what empathy is actually about, which is acknowledging other people's emotions as valid, or understanding that there's not just emotional empathy, there's cognitive empathy. How do people think, right? If you can understand how they think, you can often build a bridge from, where we have been to where we need to go. And point of view empathy, because things look different depending on where you sit in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. In order to practice my empathy, I believe I learned that from you, Esther. Please correct me if I'm wrong. In one of your articles many years ago, is a generous interpretation.
Yeah. I learned that from Jerry Weinberg.
Half of the references in your book is Jerry Weinberg.
Well, he influenced my career and my life a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, he does.
Even the dedication at the beginning.
Yeah.
for Jerry. So actually, that was
Yeah.
one of my questions. What was the influence of Jerry on this book? The only book of Jerry I've read is Secrets of Consulting.
Hmm.
And where he says, the more they pay you, the more they respect you.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. We're paying her all that money. She must be right, or we'd be silly to be paying her that much. So it's kind of a, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Jerry Weinberg.
Yeah, was it major influence on this book, at least? And
Well,
in your
on my
practice?
life.
Yeah,
On my
really?
life.
Mm.
I met Jerry in the early 90s when I was a dev manager at a big company. And he introduced me to Virginia Satir's work.
Okay.
And he was a mentor and a friend and eventually a partner. We, for 10 years, taught PSL together, problem solving leadership, which
Yep.
is a workshop that, many people have been to, and many people say it changed the way they approach their careers. So he often said that his job was to help smart people be happy.
It's a cool job.
Yeah, that's a great job. I
cool
mean,
job.
he had a whole career in the technical realm. He did some really groundbreaking work on the Mercury project. So he had huge
Really?
technical contributions. And, his book about the psychology of computer programming was the first book that says, oh, these are humans doing this work. We need to be aware of their, the humanness of people working in this field.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's how he described his job. He
Oh, wow.
helped smart
lot-
people be happy. And he helped me learn how to be happy.
Jerry comes up quite often, and one of the first thing I do when I buy a book, I look at the reference.
Yeah.
It's just a habit.
Yeah.
And I noticed one name was not there, and I created a story in my mind because it was more entertaining. I said, yeah,
Well, that's what we do.
Esther wanted to send a message to the community, and I will not.
I have a post-it with
Really?
yeah.
Oh, look at that. Oh, great minds, I tell you. Yeah. I was like, oh, look at that. There's no.
Interesting?
Isn't that it? Oh, so maybe it was not that much of a.
How fascinating.
Tell me more about that. So Cutter does not enter into your heuristics or rules when you think about change.
Not particularly, no.
Tell me more. No sense of urgency, no 8-step process.
Yeah.
Well, I think the whole idea of we have to create a burning platform is deeply disrespectful.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a real reason, talk about the real reason. Right? You don't have to create this burning platform, a sense of urgency to burst people out of their complacency.
Yeah.
If people understand that something is really necessary for the health of the enterprise, for the viability of the business, to serve their customers, they're generally pretty amenable to making some changes. What people don't particularly appreciate or respond well to is, some, flavor of the month. We have to make this huge change that, there's no reason for it, or they're coerced.
Coerced, yeah.
Right.
And when you go through the path of the burning platform, as I take your expression, you forget to use your empathy and interconnect and bring back the context and all the heuristic that you came in with. You just say, oh, look at it. Right now, our iceberg is melting. What should we do? And then you proceed with the change.
It's funny because the image that comes up for me when I think of burning platforms, I think of those drilling rigs out in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been instances like this where the rig catches on fire, and people have no choice but to jump off into the ocean where they may drown.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So we started by talking about metaphors, and burning platform is a metaphor. So that's what comes up for me. It's like, oh, so this is on fire and I have to jump into the ocean and I may drown or I may be eaten by sharks. Now, I mean, you can kind of understand why people are not in a great place to want to make a change when that's the way the change is presented to them, or it's presented in a coercive way, because no one likes being coerced,
Yeah.
really.
And
I
and
don't tend to dismiss completely the sense of urgency, but it quickly wears out. I find it quickly people get stressed out,
Yeah.
anxiety, and I prefer to work on sense of purpose.
why?
Well, and urgency can come from your internal sense that, man, we are losing money on this product because our customers are so upset with it.
We had a security breach.
Or we had a security breach, or some reason that has to do with the realities in the external world. Or urgency can come from a sense of pride in work,
Yep.
right? Or urgency can be this externally manufactured thing, which it often is in corporate settings. It's this externally manufactured thing to force people to work hard or jump off the platform or whatever it is. And it's deeply disrespectful.
It's the CEO's birthday. We need to change before the CEO's birthday.
Has that ever happened to you?
No,
Because that's actually
I
that's
heard
actually a
stories.
real story.
I heard stories of that.
There's
about
actually
that.
I actually visited an organization. I ended up not doing a lot of work with them, but anyway, they were asking people to just make huge changes in the way they were working, and I suggested to him that it would be helpful if he spoke to the folks he was asking to change and explained why it was so important, why it was important to the organization. And he did. And he came down and he says, we have to have half of our teams using Scrum by June because that's when my birthday is. And the other half have to be using Scrum by Christmas. It will be my Christmas present.
Okay.
It's like, why do you really think that? So I didn't coach him sufficiently to get him to, that was my mistake. I mean, I did not explain that the reason had to be something that other people might actually care about. I mean, I don't think anybody in there cared about his birthday or cared about his Christmas present. But yeah, I mean, why do people think that the employees live to, gratify the desires of their senior management? I mean, that's mysterious to me.
That is quite mysterious. Boy, that's
so you may have thought
egocentric.
you were making a joke, but
actually I heard stories of that. Not necessarily related to change, but related to releasing a product.
Sure.
For my birthday, guys, it's in June and it needs to be released.
But that's, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, that's bullshit.
We talked about fuck you money at some point. So yeah. We're saying that all agile coaches needed fuck you money.
Everybody does.
Yeah, basically.
Everybody does.
So that's a common expression.
I was once on a project where the date was set via a bet on the golf course. And people were working really hard to meet this goal until they found out it was just this these two executives yucking on the golf course and saying, well, I bet they can do it by this date. I mean, that's deeply disrespectful. It's deeply, deeply disrespectful.
And how can we manage the trust between the different players when you take that kind of decision? Yeah,
you can't. And so people stopped working very hard.
Yeah, totally.
Big surprise.
So 7 rules or heuristics for positive production change. I just want to list quickly. Mathieu?
It's even funny, but it's not funny. Probably you doing it by purpose, but it's not the steps, or it's not. It's a rule. It's a heuristic. There's a difference between
things
those
to
two.
keep in mind, basically.
Yeah.
And apply it when it applies.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's interesting.
So rule number 1, you mentioned it quickly, Esther, strive for congruence. This will be a common thread throughout the conversation. Number 2, honor the past is so critical. Present and the people. Past is something that we need to think about and be aware, but I'm surprised of the people. Come on, you have to honor the people. But yeah, we'll talk about that.
Of course you do. I mean,
Rule number 3: assess what is. 4: attend to networks. I have a tough question for you on that one. I'm sure Mathieu has the same question as I do.
well, I want to talk. I want to talk about the assess what is too. So we have to dwell on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll quickly
we'll come back.
dive into a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. We'll come back to them. Rule number 5: experiment.
We are agilists at the end of the day, so.
Yes. I mean, the first time I saw the expression "frame it as an experiment," it was in the book by Rachel Davies, called Agile Coaching.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And
She was around really early.
Yeah.
She did a lot of great things for the Agile.
And I've been
Agile
using that
world.
expression ever since.
Yep.
Let's just try it. Let's frame it as an experiment and see what happens. This is nothing permanent. We'll try it. Let's do an hypothesis and try it and see what happens. If it sucks, we'll stop. We'll do it different. So the experiment, and there's actually an acronym that you mentioned that I didn't know of before I read your book. A define acronym.
That's because we made it up.
There we go. Well, now everybody will. There's a million people that will know all about it.
I'll tell you how it came about if you really want.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
we're going to revisit them. Rule number 6: guide and allow for variations.
Mhm.
We'll talk about Jira in this one.
Do we have to?
Oh, yes, we definitely have to. And rule number 7, I'm assuming this is the rule that you added. Rule number 7, use yourself, 2 separate words. So we'll explore that also. Before we get into the actual rules, you talk about change by attraction. So you have to be pretty to implement change. Is that what it means?
No.
No. Okay. I misunderstood again.
Is it the only way to
We're
attract
all out
someone?
of luck if that's the case. So in complexity theory, there's this idea of attractors, which bring energy in their direction. They bring focus, they bring energy. And so I think it is much more effective to put something out there, maybe initially as an experiment that people are curious about, or, they find a little intriguing and they want to work on. And then when you see some success, then you are more likely to have more people who are interested in it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think about as change by attraction, right? And that, that eliminates that whole or much of the category of what people call resistance, which really means, they are not changing, they are not accepting my idea with the speed and enthusiasm with which I would like them to, right? So a lot of that just goes away.
If you relate it to we're agile coaches, could that be something like creating a pilot project?
Could be.
And making it shine?
Could be. Sometimes if you make it something that is scarce and exclusive, like we're just looking for one team who wants to try this thing, apply. Sometimes that makes it more attractive to people, right? Or, what I think a lot of agile coaches could benefit from is rather than coming in and saying, we're going to do the agile, is come in and look at what's going on and fix some problem that people care about, which may not be directly on the path to agile, but it's directly on the relationship path and directly on the credibility path, right?
And it's probably setting up the environment.
Right,
for
exactly.
Something else to emerge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Change by attraction. Do you have a question, Mathieu? Sorry.
Well, I don't think it's still relevant, but I just want to know it's change by attraction by opposition to change by standardizations, change by
imposition.
Yeah.
By rolling out, by installing, by driving.
Yeah.
By pushing people off the platform and overcoming their resistance.
Which step is this?
Overcoming their resistance to being pushed off the platform.
I need to remind myself which step it is. Sorry.
What's the name of the penguin? So
You didn't know that I was a pain in the butt, right, Esther?
No.
Oh, you'll figure that out by the end of that.
normally is the bad cop, I'm the good cop. That's our posture, right?
Just ask Ellen Grove how many times she's giving me the finger.
Really?
Oh,
once a meetup, at least.
Well, she got on my case for describing something as poutine. Did I say that right?
yeah.
Really good.
That she did not believe met that criteria. So I know she can be tough.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh my. All right, so let's dive into it. Rule number 1, we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Strive for congruence. So balancing the needs of oneself really in relation to the needs of others and the needs of this, I'm going to say system or the context. Yeah.
Yeah, I use the word context, but it's the system you're working in, right?
And how do you create that on Monday?
I'm starting a new contract on Monday.
Oh, okay.
But actually, I started a contract just a couple of weeks ago, so I'm pretty new. I want to learn how should I live the first rule.
Yeah, but that's a small gig. It's a small company that you started your contract with. I'm kidding. It's a huge corporation.
It's some kind of energy corporation in the province of Quebec. So you could imagine.
Google it.
Yeah, you will find it pretty fast.
Yeah. So let me tell you a story.
Yep.
So I got in this conversation with a guy who he had this idea. He was working with a team. He was a coach, and he had this idea that would fix this problem that this team had been dealing with for a really long time. And he explained it to them, and they said, "Yeah, you're right. We can't do it right now." And so he's saying, "They're resisting me. They're resisting me. Why are they resisting me?" So I asked him some questions, and it turned out that the team was actually under enormous pressure to meet a release that was really critical to the company. So he was just considering himself and his idea. You should fix this idea. We'll fix things. It's a great idea. But he wasn't considering that, man, these people are under a huge amount of pressure. There's this big release coming that's important to the company. After that, they'll want to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So does that story help?
Totally. I'm taking note, not for the interview right now. I'm taking note for my afternoon with the people I'm working with.
Yeah.
Don't take too many notes for your contract. She's going to bill us for the podcast.
Yeah. I'll send you a check.
Absolutely. This is something that we need to keep in mind on a regular basis. And
especially when you're working on the team level. I mean, what's going on for them? How can you fix something they care about? What pressure are they under? You know, if they're in the middle of something big, it's not the right time to introduce a totally new technical practice unless they're going to fail without it. And then you stop things and you learn and you reset.
And I guess that's why when we start gigs, we say to our clients, for the first 2-3 weeks, we're just going to listen.
Yep.
Are you okay with that? No, you have to implement Scrum. No, I'm not going to implement Scrum. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to understand. I'm trying to see what is your starting point. Well, here you talk about honoring the past. Maybe we're slowly touching that aspect here. Just to understand who you are, what you want to achieve, what you want to avoid, what you've tried in the past, and what is the current context, what do you need to deliver right now. And so if you're okay with that, I'm just going to listen for the first 2-3 weeks.
I think that's great.
If the client says yes, then I think we're going to be able to do fantastic things together. We're going to co-create something together.
Right.
So it should be fun.
And a note that I just take, it's about, and probably we'll discuss about it a little bit later, but about the networking and how could I get data from the network that I'm starting drawing, who's connected with who, and in which state are they, and does that influence within each other? So that was my note. You just sparked that idea with your last.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So
by reading the rules, I saw there were interconnections between all the rules.
Yeah, they are all. Yeah, they're interconnected, like anything in a system.
Yeah.
So a thing I think people forget when they go into a new organization is that you don't know much about each other. So listening is super smart, right? But if you're entering a new team, unless you have some stupendous international reputation and they recognize your name and say, "Oh man, we're saved now," they don't know if you know anything useful. Mm-hmm. They don't know if what you're going to do can help them. You don't know what they've been going through, what they're struggling with, what their capabilities are. Yeah. Yep. And if you want to be successful, you kind of have to meet people with what's the next thing they can do. Not like, oh, whoop, we're going to, sorry, I probably shouldn't have made a loud noise in the podcast.
It's okay.
We're going to slap all of Scrum on top of people, but maybe they aren't ready to do that. Maybe they need some other skills first. Yeah. Like if they don't know how to do, robust unit testing, Scrum is going to be really hard for them. So maybe you start with some unit testing stuff, right? Yeah. So you meet them where they are. So I think your way of entering the system is really, really a great one. It's just going to learn for a few weeks.
It's a good way to gauge how management is also.
Yeah.
Get closer to the mic, Eric. You will like my comment. Yeah.
It is a good way to to consider the mindset of management. And management from that usually the first question is why agile. So that's the first gauge. The second gauge is maybe that question that said, "Are you okay that I don't do nothing for the first 2 weeks?" Yeah, absolutely. I don't expect you to do anything for the first 2 weeks. If you start telling people what to do on the first day, you're fired. I like you. Yes. I like you.
Well, and maybe you could reframe it instead of saying I'm not going to do anything. It's like I'm going to be doing action research. I'm going to be researching. I'm going to be gathering data. I'm going to be
based on the research of Benjamin something, I'm going to do a percolator matrix research system. Really? Wow, I don't pay you enough.
But it's not that easy to simply listen, simply watch, simply just being actively collecting data and trying to observe what's happening in the system.
Yeah. And I think that's a crucial skill.
Totally.
It's especially difficult because I do get a sense of accomplishment when I do share when I'm in a mentoring mentoring stance, and it's especially hard to say no. I'm just going to observe for now. When the team says, "Please help us, we are suffering," and it's like, okay, well, you can try this and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, if they ask, then maybe you have a suggestion. You say, based on what I've seen so far, maybe you try this, and it can be a tiny little thing.
Tiny little thing, absolutely.
Tiny thing.
Yeah, a baby step. That's an experiment.
Yeah.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
They're all connected.
They're all connected.
So we are at rules number 2 right now.
Yeah, well, we talked about rule number 1. Let's just to reiterate: empathy.
Yeah.
Practice. I mentioned using generous interpretation to practice my empathy. There's this other thing, this fundamental attribution error.
Yes.
There's another tool I use, which is not really a tool; it's just a concept that I use to practice. I don't have empathy naturally. It's not it's not in my DNA. So I practice. I've been practicing since my daughter is 13 years old. She's 21 now. I've been practicing.
I am not sure that's true.
Go ahead.
I think people can develop their empathy. I think that is absolutely correct. People can practice empathy. They can develop their capacity for empathy. But there is some research that shows that even infants have empathy.
That's how the human.
It's like
survive.
If you show them a puppet that's hitting someone and a puppet that's nice, they gravitate to the nice one, and they gravitate away from the one that's hitting. And no one's being hurt in these experiments, but there is research that shows that it's pretty hardwired.
I get a feeling
or pre-wired.
We suffocate it. We set it
Yeah.
aside
Oh,
as
yeah.
we
Yeah.
learn stuff or unlearn.
There was a time in this probably the 60s and 70s when empathy was considered an elimination factor in interviewing for software development jobs and programming jobs.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah.
Really.
Wow.
This. Usually it's like, okay, name me
And-
5 design patterns.
but today, even get empathy for the client or for the user, it's one of the most important skills
Yeah.
that the developer could have. So it's,
Yeah,
that's
we just released a podcast on design thinking, and
Yeah.
that was a huge part of our conversation. Do I still have the Kleenex box? No, new Kleenex box. It's winter. Let's have fun with rule number 2. Honor the past, the present, and the people. One of my greatest fears when I enter a new system is breaking things, or people think they have to stop doing something that works. And that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, and people don't often think about that in change situations, because thinking about what you want to keep is as important as thinking about what you want to change. And when you come in and you just, you slap some whole thing on it, you're destroying some things that work.
Mm-hmm. That's
Right.
probably even more important.
Yeah.
To identify what we should keep and why.
Yeah.
Oh,
And when people feel like they're listened to, they're much more likely to listen to you, right?
Mhm.
They're doing the best they can. They're probably following some process that the previous management stuck them with, right? So,
Mhm. Yeah.
I met a consultant once who was bragging about how he'd go into an organization and tell people they were too stupid to have their jobs. You are too stupid to be employed. And, and he was proud of making people cry. And, how did that,
what
he
book is this?
might have been a little lacking in empathy. So, but he, how does that help people want to change? Shaming people doesn't help people change, right?
They
People
break them.
change. Yeah. People change when they feel like they have some worth and value and they're capable of change. But if you tell people they're stupid, and why are you employed?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a technique I
Oh,
wouldn't
I
mind
have
reading about,
stories.
just to see how that works exactly. But I guess the ultimate goal is get that person to quit their job, hire somebody new, change.
Yeah.
Oh.
Who fit with the new strategy or the
We'll
new
just
processes.
we'll just install a new person in that position.
Yep.
So how do you determine what works well?
Interesting question.
Well, you observe and you see if you can draw some connections. I mean, it's often hard to tell in systems, because everything's intertwined, what exactly is the things that are causing, but, you observe,
Mm.
right? And you talk to people
Mhm.
and you look at what the outcomes are and try to trace back to the things that contribute to that.
Yeah.
Or even when you try to change some little pieces here and there, you will see if
Yeah.
it was a positive impact or a negative impact, and how can you navigate, because
Yeah.
at some point you may change something that was pretty cool and you will get rid of your changes and get back to the current state.
So I think that's, when people come in with a predefined solution, right? We are going to do the Scrum, or we are going to do the Agile, or whatever it is. There's a billion of them. I mean, there's marketing methods that people just come in and roll out a marketing method, and all sorts of them.
Eric,
when
I
you
could
come-
read your mind right now. I know.
I have issues with some scaling frameworks, but
Oh, really? Oh, well, maybe that's for another day. But it does remind me of certain languages that it is, you remember VB5?
oh yeah,
I think it was
remember.
VB.
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah.
VB5.
VB6 was
It was
my-
VB5 or VB6, where you
6.
could write it in an object-oriented way, but you could also write it
In a
not that way. It didn't
procedural
enforce. It did not enforce the object orientation. So I think there are some frameworks that you could do them in an agile way, but if your mind already isn't there, you're going to do them just the way you've already done them.
Yeah, you just change the labels.
Yeah, exactly. So what was I saying before that? What was I saying? It
well,
was
we were
really,
hon-
it
we
was
were honoring
really
the past.
important.
How
It
could
was
we
super important.
how could we see if it's a good change, if we
Yeah.
must keep it or not? if it's a good change or a bad change.
I don't know that thought's gone.
How should I say this? Some people will feel, based on their context, that this is a good way of working, good way of getting something done. They are able to go from A to B, and it's fantastic. And we want to honor that.
Yeah.
That will actually be the present. That's the way they work right now. But we know clearly, based on our past experiences, that it is a very irresponsible way of doing things. So
I have some information that you might find helpful. That's what you do. Okay, my thought came back. It came back into my head. So when you come in with this whole preconceived package that you're just going to implement, it's like your curiosity is turned off, right? Like, I have the solution. Why would I bother looking at what they're doing now? Why would I bother? This is the one right way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think tuning up your curiosity is helpful, not just, how can I slap this process on top of everything else? Let's get curious about how things came to be, what people value about it.
Yeah.
So be curious, use the empathy.
Observe.
That's 2 things. Yeah.
I mean, okay, you've just increased your ability to nurture change by about 1 billion%.
And in 2021, we're probably not the first agile coaches to enter that ecosystem.
Yep.
Probably not.
They probably tried something with a previous agile coach, and and we're just the latest agile trophy.
Yeah, which people talk about resistance, and if you're the 6th round of agile coaches that have been in there, I do not fault people one bit.
Neither do I.
For being exhausted, for being a little cynical, for being like, oh, this too shall pass, because that's their lived experience, right?
That's their reality.
Right. Yeah, it's their reality that they've been given different directions by 6 different people.
And we understand that, and and completely empathetic in regards to that.
Yeah.
I'm the 6th coach to enter this department. I won't name any names. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Okay.
So can I tell you a Jerry story?
Yeah, please.
So this is not my story. This is a story that Jerry used to tell a lot. And it goes along with his, generous interpretation thing. So, he also said, no matter what it looks like, people are trying to be helpful. So he was working with this client who most people were kind of going along with him, but there was this one guy who it really seemed like he was trying to sabotage what they were doing. And Jerry kept trying to make a positive interpretation, and he just couldn't figure out from what perspective was this guy's actions actually helpful.
Yeah.
So we went and talked to the guy, and he said, I'm really trying to understand where you're coming from. And the only thing I can figure out is that you're trying to sabotage this change that we're trying to bring. And the guy said, yep, I am.
Interesting.
Said, because our management brings in a new set of consultants every 6 to 9 months. And we have to stop everything we're doing, and we have to learn a new way of doing things. And our productivity goes to hell. We have this customer deadline that we have to meet. So I just want us to meet the deadline. And if we start doing what you're asking us to do, everything will grind to a halt, will slow down. And from that perspective, it was helpful. And so what Jerry did was adjusted his approach, and they said, okay, let's see what we can do that will enable you to keep working in a more productive way and also move towards a different direction.
Let's work together, and probably the intervention of Jerry will be much more
effective.
Effective.
In many ways, Jerry was lucky in this case, because the person was honest and upfront. And often that's not what we get. We might confront someone and say, dude, what are you doing? and the person was, no, I'm with it, I'm going, but this, they're sabotaging in the background.
Yeah, well, I don't think he confronted him, and I think that's part of it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, he said, I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You speak probably from their perspective instead of confronting the other guys.
Like, not like you're a bad person. I'm just, I can't make sense of this.
Right. So honoring. It's not about observing. It's not about documenting. It's about it's a mindset. I find the rule number two. Connecting with the past, the present, and the individuals that are part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And honoring
that's the way I recorded it in my mind, because in rule number 3, assess what is.
Yes.
I had to do a distinction, because I said, is honoring the present the same thing as assessing what is? But it isn't. What's the difference?
No, it's a little different. And in some ways, I mean, you talked about when you first go in, you observe and you get to know people and get to be known by them and have conversations and so forth. But assessing is actually looking at the whole system, right? And saying, what holds the current pattern in place? And this is something that is overlooked in any number of, agile transformations, where you have an existing system that is generating patterns of responses and results, right? Every system is designed to create the results that it is creating, right? Whether they're designed or not, or evolved that way. So you have this existing system.
You're tapping into Edgar Schein now, right?
Well, I have learned from many people over my many years on this planet. So you come in and you have this existing system and you slap the agile on it, or whatever it is. And unless you address what is holding the current pattern in place, it will reassert itself. That pattern will show up again.
The fundamental beliefs of the organization.
Yeah, and the way, their policies and their practices and their
values and the culture.
The way their job descriptions are written, the way people are rewarded, the way projects are funded, all of that stuff will reassert itself, and it will come back in that pattern. And so people say, well, the agile didn't work for us. It's like, well, you painted something over the top, but you need to actually deal with what is, right? You may have a vision of where you want to go, what direction you want to go in, but you have to deal with what is. And then either, address those factors that hold the pattern in place, right? So something new can emerge. You just can't put a process on top of it, right?
Absolutely. It's all about observing and the artifacts of an organization, and saying, is this still generating value and reducing organizational anxiety or not?
Well, I mean, I look at organizations in a bunch of different ways. I mean, I find some of Glenda Ouyang's methods for looking at organizations super helpful. You can do a value stream that will tell you one thing, but her CDE model gives you a completely different understanding. It's often very, very useful. So I look at organizations in a bunch of different ways, and then
you have to.
You have to. They're multifaceted.
Rule number 4, with my tough question.
Rule number 4.
Attend to networks. Well, first of all, what does it mean? And then quickly, before I forget, my question will be, how do you do that in the current context? You can say, I don't know. I'm completely okay with that.
Well, I think networks are super important. Both the ones you can observe, the ones you can weave, and the ones you might break. Right. A lot of changes break networks, and people are then surprised, oh, things aren't working anymore. The change must be wrong. It's like, no, we broke up really important network.
Your go-to person is no longer there. They're over there now.
Right. I mean, the communication paths are disrupted. Exactly. One of the stories that I use in the book is from a company my husband used to work for, actually, where they were growing, and they decided, rather than until they could move to a new office space, they would get rid of the company cafeteria and turn it into, or the company lunchroom, and turn it into offices. But that lunchroom was where a lot of the cross-pollination took place.
There you go. Yeah. And they removed that environment.
They removed the environment, and it broke the network, and it had consequences for the organization. So you can also weave networks You know, when you notice that, oh, this useful thing is happening over in this part of the organization, and these people are doing something similar. Oh, well, let's introduce them. And it might be a one-on-one introduction, or it might be, oh, let's do a lean coffee together on this topic. And we invite people from both groups so they get to know each other and they are now aware of each other. But there's a lot of things you can do to actually weave networks.
Yeah.
Because they're hugely influential, right? Our behavior is largely shaped by the people we tend to associate with, and it affects all aspects of our life.
Oh, absolutely. So true.
Yep.
So one technique is to get people to start smoking, right?
No, that was just no.
I misunderstood your book once again. That time.
I quit smoking. I'm trying to think how long ago. Maybe 35 years ago, something like that. 36 years ago.
I think your lungs are back to normal now.
Yeah, I think my lungs are. I'm back to the risk of someone who had never smoked. But smokers in organizations are, at least when we used to go to office buildings, that was a really interesting network because it crossed all levels and all departments.
Yep.
And those people always knew what was going on.
And they have something to exchange. They have something to share. They have
There's at least in the US, they're sitting outside, smoking.
They have something in common.
In 20 below weather.
Yeah. I actually did that at Yellow Pages. I went outside with a gang of smokers that I knew that I was working with, and manager, developer, QA, BA from different teams, and just having a casual conversation. Often we didn't even talk about work-related stuff, but still building that relationship at that moment was nice. But I smell like smoke after.
Yeah. So I can't stand smelling like smoke. So I don't do that, but there are other ways. I mean, I talked to some folks who work for a large company that is largely remote and has been largely remote for many years. And one of their approaches to creating cross organizational networks is they have all sorts of company sponsored guilds about hobbies. So they have the people who knit, and they have the people who do 5-pin bowling, and they have the people who do woodworking, and the people who do small
running,
batch brewing, and beer and running and all those things, which again create these cross organizational networks.
So in the current context, that's something that we could set up. Scrum Master, manager, or just an employee, or whoever, the right person, basically, start a Zoom monthly thing, or.
Well, it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, when I was track chairing for a conference a number of years ago, and I actually had a review team. A lot of people had reviewers, but I actually had a review team. And we just had an open channel on it. Initially it was on Skype. That's how long ago it was, where we just had an open channel, and people could talk about anything there. They could talk about work there. They could talk about, curing meats or whatever it was they did. And that created some of the social glue that, helped people deal with conflict. It allowed people to know, oh, I feel a connection with you. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, or I know you, so can I talk to you about this? But a lot of those friendships are still intact, 10 years later. And I do that within companies too. I create a place where the people who need to work together can work together outside of the view of management. Right. So they can get to know each other. And that's even more important now that most of our meetings are highly structured. Right. And that's one of the reasons I do it in client situations when people are distributed, because they don't have any time to get to know each other as humans, or to share their concerns or what they're working on outside of very structured meetings or very chaotic meetings in which, whoever gets to share, it's random. So I think that's something we can really pay attention to. Is we have a sanctioned chit chat channel, or we have our sanctioned hobby channel, or whatever, so that we can maintain those social connections and build up networks. And you can, you can be conscious about it. And I guess some people would say it's manipulative, but
that came with the idea. Right now, I'm the new guy in my gig, and I want to spend a lot of time trying to understand that network, to find those networks, and there's two things that I keep in mind. First, be authentic. That's why I react on your last statement, because if I'm faking that I love knitting, for example, it will happen upfront. Everybody will detect that I'm totally phony and I'm not totally
the
authentic.
first time you try to cast on, everyone will know.
Yeah, totally. So
if
by
you only
opposition,
knew what cast on meant.
Yeah, see?
So be authentic and take the time. For
Yeah.
sure, during that COVID situation, it's more complex. It will take more times, but take it. So
Well, and if you look at, a lot of companies are using Slack now. I mean, if you do some basic analysis on the Slack, you can figure out what the networks are. Who talks to whom about what, and who goes to whom for advice, and whose word seems to carry weight.
And maybe all meetings on Zoom or whatever, Teams or Skype, the first, let's say, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just a chit chat.
Chit chat.
Yeah.
How are you today? How are you feeling? Yeah, I'm good. It's and I got this idea right now in my brain through a conference from Simon Sinek. When we had meetings in person in the good old days, where people get into the meeting and they go on their phone. He was saying, no, when you get into a meeting, leave your phone aside and have casual conversation with the people around you before you getting to the actual content of the meeting. Leave your phone aside. Maybe it's the same thing in a way. Go on a Zoom meeting, chit chat, and then dive into the actual objective of the meeting.
Yeah, well, I think that is part of the objective of the meeting. Is to actually foster some connection with people so that they can work more effectively together. And, I mean, you can do that with an open space, or you can have a question that's the prompt, not some kind of goofy question like, what kind of animal do you think you are? But, something that gives people, a conversation to start with, because there are people who haven't practiced their social skills and haven't learned how to have conversations with people. So you might give them a question to start.
And in software development, it's not a required class in university.
No, and it's not selected for in hiring.
Also, absolutely, except for that one company that you mentioned before. The empathy question.
Oh no, it was not selected for. It was an elimination factor. So anyway.
So understanding the network, the influencers, who you can play with to generate change within your organization. You come up with something you together, co-creating or by invitation, trying something, experiment, and you invented the FINE acronym.
We want fast feedback, inexpensive, no permission needed, and easy.
Oh, the last two are nasty.
No permission needed and easy. So I used to say those in some sort of random order. And I was teaching a workshop with my friend and colleague, Don Gray, and we were in Stockholm, and we were both really jet lagged. And we had written them up in sort of random order on a flip chart, and we're both there saying, if we reordered them, they would spell fine.
Marketing.
So that's what it took. It took jet lag to say, oh, that's fine.
Yeah, it is nice. A nice thing to
But
keep in mind.
It is a nice little acronym, I must say.
Yeah, absolutely. Framing stuff, I mentioned it earlier, framing things as an experiment, making sure that we understand that we're going to try something. I do like to force individuals to come up with a expectation or a hypothesis, and then at the end, basically the experimental approach method.
I mean, it has to be based on some rationale. I mean, you're not just like randomly poking.
At least an hypothesis.
So yeah,
Well,
if
we
do
think this, we
will
think
happen.
if we do this, we think it will affect these factors in this way.
Yeah, let's
And
try
so then
something.
you, yeah, then you can observe those factors and see if they actually do change, which is like, you talked earlier about, people, when you go into an organization, you ask them why agile. It's like, okay, so what are we hoping to affect if we start using agile methods? What changes would we actually observe in our organization? Right. So you have to have some idea about
Absolutely.
what you're hoping to see and what would tell you that it's going the wrong way. Because people often don't consider disconfirming data. So that's also useful to look for.
Yeah. So when you say the small changes,
Really tiny.
sorry,
Tiny,
changes.
really tiny.
I believe in it. I agree with you 100%. But I'm often torn by this other guest we had a while ago, an expert on systems thinking, where local changes will often hurt the system. Local optimization will de-optimize the system as a whole. How do you balance the two?
Well, that's why you're looking at what your hypothesis is and what outcome you're looking for. Right. And it's useful to think about who also might be affected by this change. Now, philosophically, I agree that local optimization at the expense of the whole is an issue. In day-to-day life in organizations, particularly in the field we're in, if we can do some experiments and reduce the number of defects that are leaving our team and meeting the customer, that may have some effects, right, outside of our group. But I don't think we're necessarily looking at damaging the overall system or making the whole system less effective when we're talking about that kind of change. So, philosophically, theoretically, absolutely, you do not want to optimize the local. But we're not talking about optimizing the local. We're talking about getting it to basically function, right?
True. Yeah.
And, if you get really, really good at delivering software really, really fast, maybe you'll find out this is faster than our customers can absorb these changes, right?
Yeah.
At which point then you have to,
Or the
you have to
marketing
be aware
team,
of that. Right.
The
Right.
marketing
I mean,
team being able to accompany the team to market something new.
or the training people,
yeah.
we have, you're telling us we have to redo our training every 2 weeks. Yay.
Your velocity went from 20 to 40 points, but we can't keep up.
Yeah, right. So that's something you have to pay attention to, right? But when we're talking about where most software teams are coming from, it's a far off concern.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we use rule number 1 to 4, we will have input around. Damn! I make a change that disturbed the documentation team or the whatever team. I should revert that change.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we've reached our time box. Can we go on a few more minutes?
Well, how many rules do we have left to talk about?
Just 2, but the 2 easy ones.
As long as they're easy.
Wow. It was a tricky question or with a big bias.
Maybe we'll go back to 6 rules. Rule 6, guide and allow for variations, sorry.
Yeah.
And use your space self. I find that space so important. It changes everything, I find. Allow for variations.
Well, I think too often, people prescribe in detail what the change needs to be. And that makes it actually less likely that it's going to fit, because you can't anticipate every variation for every team, for every situation you're going to run into. But it also makes it less likely that people are going to feel like they have any investment in it. I mean, people like to get their fingerprints on stuff.
Absolutely.
So I often intentionally leave certain things kind of vague, because then people fill in the gaps with something that fits their context. And of course you need to have boundaries, right? It's like, there's a lamp on the other side of this on my screen here, helping with the lovely lighting. And, you know, there are a limited number of ways that are shapes of light bulb fixtures, you know, that fit into the socket. There's, you know, there's dozens of them, but it's limited.
Yeah.
Right. But the amount of variation you can have in the way the shade looks is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And the wiring has to be just one way.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
The way it plugs into the wall has to be just one way within your country boundary.
Yeah.
So it's useful to think about where does standardization actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's where it interfaces with another system.
That's right.
Or where there's a safety issue, or where, you know, you might want to choose from X number of options.
Mhm.
But, you know, there's some stuff that as long as you say, you know, as long as this doesn't break when it's exposed to the heat of a light bulb, and, you know, it's not going to just crash and break and it deflects the light, whatever, do what you want, go wild.
Mhm.
Here's the decor, make it fit the decor.
Yeah, and I guess that's one thing that I know it might sound silly, but it hurts me. It hurts the initiative on a regular basis. We want teams to be self-organized. We want teams to be transparent.
But do it exactly this way.
But you're not allowed to change the flow in Jira. I know it's silly. I know it's a silly tool. It's just Jira, but the team goes, Eric, wait a second here. You're telling us to be self-organized, do this, and now we can't even change a silly thing. What's the point? We're going to do whatever the company says we want to do. So then they lose faith a little bit. They will start blaming as opposed to taking responsibility. So it hurts. It hurts. And these are some of the artifacts that exist that will prevent change from happening.
So I have a question for you. So when I run into situations like that, the argument is almost always, well, we have to have it standardized so that we can have this roll-up reporting, right?
Yep.
Have you guys heard that?
Yeah, I'm leaving it right now.
Have you ever met anyone who actually looks at that roll-up reporting?
Nope.
Me neither.
There's an intention of roll-up reporting, and at some point we'll aggregate data, and at some point we'll do something. But
yeah, but you know,
that's actually a change technique that I use regularly. Let's just stop doing this. See what happens.
Who cares?
And
I haven't met anybody who actually uses that roll up. You know, I mean, maybe at a program level, if they have 10 teams, somebody is paying attention to that. But you could just as easily get that information by
other way.
Understanding a little bit about what each team's context is.
Yeah. So allow for variations locally, very locally. Do it, deliver value, but do it the way you want. If you have to interconnect with other aspects, or you have security, conformity, and other standards, keep that in mind, and maybe challenge the standard.
Yeah, that
organizational change.
A lot of standards aren't serving a useful purpose. They may have at one time, but I think we're sort of as a culture, and given the mechanistic history, our kind of standardization is viewed as uniformly a good thing. And it's very useful when the work is standard or when the product is standard, but when it's not, it just makes things worse.
It's a pure human endeavor, and it changes every day. Last but not least, use yourself.
Use yourself.
But you must do a Myers-Briggs test.
No, you must not.
Followed by this test, followed by
no, you must not.
What was it where we were, Mathieu? We were at business chemistry. That was the new one there. That was.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Well, are you a red guy or?
Are you?
You are. The first step is organizational astrology.
I have purple and green and pink and orange and red. I don't think I have any yellow. Oh, that's kind of a green yellow right there. So
I for those who know me, such as Mathieu, they know I call it organizational astrology.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Well, I think it is super useful to be aware of your own preferences and your own tendencies and your own behavior.
Yes, for you yourself.
I think having that awareness is super useful. like, so one of the things I'm aware of about myself is that I tend to like to keep my options open until I close them. And then I'm I'm usually very, firm on what my decision is. You're just taunting me with that. And that's confusing to some people.
Yeah.
That's confusing because they say, well, you were so reasonable and flexible, and now suddenly you changed. And so I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of my tendency to go to counterexample. So if someone says, oh, this is always the case, my mind just
Opposition.
automatically goes to the one exception in the entire world. It's just what it does. So with that self-awareness and having observed that it really annoys people sometimes, I have learned to dummy up, right? So my mind goes there, but I don't always say it. Right. So I think self-awareness is hugely important. And some of those, personality measurement things are helpful in developing some self-awareness.
Which is the first step of coaching, of a coach. Being aware of yourself.
Yeah.
Mathieu, what are you aware of yourself?
I tend to do a lot of disclaimers. You want to talk about it, Eric? But that's I act like this. I don't know where it came from, but
It's an old story, because when we first started working together, you will always prefix everything with a disclaimer. I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong. It's okay. No. And I saw him. I went, dude, I don't care.
Stop it.
Well,
it's not required.
It's a habit that served you well at some time.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that don't serve me, and I must play with it. I must try to live.
And I probably didn't show enough empathy when I challenged you on that.
Or that challenged me, and I evolved and I changed a little bit myself. So I take it very positively.
Yeah. So we
that's one example of myself.
We quickly went through the 7 heuristics. I don't like saying rules, but they're not rules.
I want to say something else about use yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Yourself. So I have a whole bunch of friends who are licensed clinical social workers, and we talk. And one of them we were talking about. There's been study after study after study that shows that if you take 2 people who have roughly the same professional education and roughly the same professional skills, they can have very different outcomes in very similar cases. And they have similar skills, they have similar educational backgrounds, so it's not about that. What the studies have shown time and time again is it's the ability of the person to show up, be present, and be empathetic that changes the outcomes.
Beautiful.
Right. So that's why I added that, because I think it's really more important than most people think. And there's an article called Slow Ideals by Atul Gawande, in which he describes the efforts to change maternal health care in rural hospitals in very poor parts of India. So look it up. It's a great story. Sure. And what it comes down to is that, the person who was bringing these changes in our procedures, she wasn't, blaming me. She wasn't shaming me. She understood me. She was like a friend.
Wow.
And that's what makes the difference. That is absolutely what makes the difference.
Thank you for sharing that. Look at the description below for the references.
It will appear there.
And I think I just got the excerpt for the podcast. I think that's what's going to be. It's very, very nice. There's so many subjects I want to talk to you about, but
I could spend the rest of the afternoon talking to you guys.
Yeah, I'm saying here, it's so great. It's so great. I mean, obviously, talking about agile retrospective.
Mhm.
Would be
Behind
cool.
closed door.
Maybe some other time. We'll
Yeah.
set up in a few months another date. Um, I would have loved to talk to you about immunity to change. This is something that really I find wonderful. So I wanted to pick your brain on that also. Maybe in a future podcast,
Another time.
we can divert away from going through down the various rules and heuristics, and just navigate through various subjects, which happens often on different podcasts. Anything you want to announce?
Or
Scoops,
share.
share.
Or promote.
Yeah.
Well, I have an online course based on the 7 Rules book. And it is available in a self-study version and also in a live video cohort where we go through a bunch of exercises diving into the main challenges that people experience with change.
Okay.
So we're not going through, 1 through 7. We're looking at the main challenges that people experience with change and applying the heuristics to those. So there's asynchronous work, and then we get together and discuss it in the live video cohort. So I have one running now, and I will probably run another in the spring.
Okay.
And where can we found it?
On my website at estherderby.com, oddly enough.
Cool.
That's great. Yeah. So I will add the link for sure in the description.
And one more thing, I'm doing this series of free webinars this winter, starting at the end of January.
Okay.
Because I think a manager's most important job is working on the system and developing people. So that's what the theme of this winter series is going to be out. The one in January is on offering feedback. You can also find those on my website.
Yeah, feedback is another great subject right there.
It is.
Because most of it is not feedback. It's judgment.
No, it's evaluation.
Evaluation.
Or
Yes.
criticism, blame, whatever.
Yeah,
Anything.
we often do communities of practice, and feedback is something that comes up often.
Yeah.
And usually it comes back 3 or 4 or 5 sessions of community of practice, and we just dig into it more and more and more and more. It's a very valuable skill to develop.
I would love to know what you guys are learning about that in your community practice.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of those community practice ended up being, how do you offer feedback to your children for them to clean up their room? It evolved towards that at some point.
Oh, interesting.
And then the one afterwards is same thing, but how do we offer feedback to management to get them to clean up their room? So we basically try to get concepts that are out of the realm of agility, and because often we're stuck in our own little ideas. So we moved out of the very small realm of agile conversations and agile.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
It was a lot of fun.
You have to get back with us.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Esther, thank you so much for being
It's been my pleasure. It's been really, really fun having this conversation with you guys.
Thank you very much. And we'll see each other soon at the next Agile Coach Camp in Waterloo.
In person?
In person, yes.
Are they going to let
2022 maybe?
Maybe
in 2022? I
so.
would be surprised if they had opened the border at this point.
Yeah, me too. Same. Yeah, I'm aiming for 2022. And
I would love to come.
It's going to be the longest hug ever.
And hopefully we'll all be vaccinated by then.
Yes,
Probably.
Last time I checked, I was number 85,000 in line in my county.
Oh, that was my question. In the country, the county, the
county, and I live in a sparsely populated county, so it's going to be a while.
That means you're young, you're healthy.
No,
vibrant.
it doesn't. healthy, yes.
You work from home, so probably.
Yeah.
So it's in a way it's good news. Well, glass half full. Esther, again, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Have a good skiing.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.